So let's get our perspective. The way it appears so far, last week we received the Torah, PARSHA Yisro, right? It has the giving of the Torah. And now this is the first week when we start talking about what's in the Torah, other than what was immediately at that event, right? Like the Ten Commandments. And that's why the PARSHA begins with a Vav. It says, V'ela, and these. That is to say that everything we read in last week's Parsha came from Mount Sinai, right? Moshe came down from Mount Sinai, he had the Ten Commandments, right? And you'd say, well, for sure, those are spiritual, those come from God, right? The Ten Commandments. So now this Parsha begins, and these are the Mishpatim. A Mishpat is a law. It's a little different than some of the other laws. It's more of a civil law, how to deal with government, with each other. It doesn't talk about sacrifices and religious types of things. It's really more practical. And it's telling us right away that just like those laws that came down from Mount Sinai were spiritual, these are also spiritual. These also come from God. And it tells you a message which which we will find debatable at first, but then we'll understand better, I think, which is that if it wasn't for the fact that God told us these laws, we wouldn't know them. People say, what do I need God to tell me not to murder? I know not to murder. And why? Well, it's logical. If I don't murder, people won't murder me. If I don't steal, people won't steal from me. Right? In other words, I'm going to make a world. It's logical. I'll make a world where nobody steals because nobody wants to be stolen from. Right? I don't need God to tell me that. That's what people say. Right? And people say the same thing, right, with murder, with everything. It's logical. I know that this is the case. So we have a belief, and it's a true belief, that if the Torah did not tell us that you can't do these things, we wouldn't know it. It's not that we wouldn't be able to figure out you shouldn't steal. Right? You own something, right? I own something, you own something, and I take your thing, whatever it is, right? So you should say, logical, I shouldn't steal from others, so others will steal from me. Then I'll have to, I have a guard everywhere I go, and I have to lock up all my stuff all the time. People will steal. But if everybody, right, so say that's logical. But the fact is that when it comes to these laws, we are forgetting much of it. Like, for instance, read the papers now. The papers, once again, are bringing up abortion. Now it's called late-term abortion. Right? At what point do we say that really you can't do an abortion? According to Canadian law allows abortion. So does it say abortion in the first 3 months, in the first 6 months? How about 2 days before the baby is going to be born? What's an abortion? So they're having a whole argument about it. You know what they're questioning? Murder. Is this murder? Is it not murder? So clearly they don't know the definition of murder. We're deciding it. The Canadian government is deciding it. They have a right to decide certain things. Right? The Torah says that you have to make a government. The government has to make laws. So they have to decide. But the fact is, if it's logical that you can't murder, so why is this a question? Because it's not so logical. When you have an older person in the hospital and they're not well, and they're on a respirator, right? And they say, listen, we've got medical supplies and medical expenses, and we don't want to use it all on this person. They lived a nice long life. Why do you want to do that to them? Or go on and on with the things that they'll say, right? That you should pull the plug on this person, right? Is that murder? Well, they don't seem to think it is. So how do we know? So that's why it tells you in the Torah that murder is against the Torah, is wrong. And it defines what murder is. It defines if abortion is murder. It defines if euthanasia is murder. It defines what is brain dead, what is alive, what is a respirator. It defines it. So even the things that we think civilization will figure it out, they will only in broad terms figure it out. But in specific details, they're not. You need something to teach us this. But not only that, well, it's logical as for us to say, what came from Mount Sinai? Oh, it came from Mount Sinai. You got to keep kosher, you got to keep Shabbos, you got to honor your parents. These are all very spiritual things. So now the Parsha begins here and says, and these laws, these practical laws that I'm going to tell you now, these are as much spiritual from God as the laws of keeping kosher, as all of these spiritual laws, eating the sacrifices, eating the sacrifice for Passover, all of these spiritual laws that we have, You know those come from the Torah. Well, I want you to know that these laws come from the Torah too. So what is it? So the first one it tells you is key. Sikna ebed ivri, if you go and acquire for yourself a Jewish slave. Now you'd say, this comes from the Torah, a Jewish slave? So that's the point. The idea of a Jewish slave is as spiritual as keeping Shabbos. Knowing how to treat people is a fundamental, important thing. And that's exactly why the first parsha that talks about the Torah, after we receive the Torah, is going to detail all types of issues that have to do with how one person treats another person. Because that's the foundation of Jewish life. You can't be a spiritual person thinking about mysticism and so forth and not be kind to people. It doesn't work. And therefore this is telling you, you think the spiritual laws come from Sinai, that's logical. These laws also come from Sinai. These are also from God. Right? And the reason that it starts out with specifically the slave is because it's saying the following. How do you treat a slave? So, in Judaism, a slave is very different than the slaves we hear about. Even different than I guess you called them as servants in South Africa with the blacks, right, 50 years ago, 30 years ago. Where even in those cases, it's different than a Jewish slave. You know what a Jewish slave is? A Jewish slave in most cases was a person who stole something, right, and he got caught, and he has to pay it back, and he can't. He doesn't have the money. Let's say you see people in the paper. They embezzle from their business, from a business that they worked in. You have a bookkeeper. She embezzles from her business. Every year she takes $30,000 over 20 years. Right? She's now taken $600,000. Right? She can't. Actually, where's she going to get $600,000 now that she got caught? She'll never have it. So in such a case, what happens? Judaism says the world used to say you throw them in debtor's prison. Well, they're never going to get out because they have no money. How are they going to get out? Right? They're going to be there the rest of their life. And Judaism says no. The person needs to have a clean start. So they sell themselves as a servant, as a slave, and their debt is paid by doing this. They can only be a slave for 7 years, according to this, and that's how they get out of it. But how is a slave treated compared to slaves in the world that we think of? Like when people hear the Torah says how to have a slave, I think it's barbaric, right? But slaves in Judaism are very, very different. A slave in Jewish life is, it says, if you have a slave and you have one pillow, the slave gets the pillow. And it says, if you have one bedroom, the slave gets the bedroom. The slave has to be treated with dignity that would even exceed your own dignity for yourself. You can't be cruel. You can't overwork them. You can't treat them like subhuman. You have to treat them with dignity just like any other person. And the whole concept is radically different. And if that's the case, they're radically different. And I said before, how does a person get to be a slave? He stole from you. And then he comes back to you and he can't pay you. So he says, I'll be your slave for 7 years and pay you off. So you're now hiring the guy who stole from you to work in your house. Right? That's what you're doing. Right? And you have to treat him with respect. And if you have one pillow, he gets the pillow, right? If you're not such a rich guy, because he stole $600,000 from you, now you don't have any money, you got one pillow, he gets the pillow. You have one blanket, he gets the blanket. You have enough food for one person, he gets the food first. You imagine? He stole from you, now you let him in your house, to work in your house, and you got to treat him with respect. So the Torah is telling you that this is how you treat a person who did something to you and who's repented for it. But you treat them with dignity, you treat them with respect. And if you have to treat a thief with respect, you have to treat a slave with respect, who's the same person, then how do you treat other people? Other regular people. You certainly have to treat them with respect. So that's the law number one. The Torah says that you heard all about I'm the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. You heard all about keeping Shabbos. You heard about keeping kosher. Well, I'm going to tell you something. These laws that I'm going to tell you now are the foundation of Jewish life, and they are as spiritual as keeping Shabbos. And if you don't follow these laws, the rest won't work. What is that? How you treat people. If the Torah tells you, law number one, a guy steals from you, and you do him a favor, and you say, okay, instead of paying me $600,000, you're going to work for me for 6 years. right? And I'm going to let you in my house, which already the guy stole from you. You're going to let him in your house, right? And you're going to live in my house. I'm going to treat you better than I treat myself. Then that's how a person knows how you treat other Jews, other people, not just Jews, other people. Right? And that's how the Torah begins. And so that's rule number one. That's what they used to say in slang. That's Jump Street. That's the beginning. You start here. That's go in Monopoly. Right? You start there. So then you can do the rest. And then now it tells you let's look at some of the laws about a slave. So it says, right, if you acquire yourself a Hebrew slave, for 6 years he should work for you. In the 7th year he goes free. And it says, im begapo yavo, begapo yetze. What does that mean? So there's many translations. Let's see how they say it here. If he shall arrive by himself, he shall leave by himself. Right? It's a funny way of saying it, because gapo it doesn't really mean himself. If you look in the commentaries give different meanings. It could be gapo is very similar to gufo. A pei and a fei, f and p are very similar in Hebrew. Which gufo means his body. If he comes in with his body, he goes out with his body. That's it. Right? If he comes in with nothing, he leaves with nothing. But most people say that this means a coat of some sort. If he comes in with a coat, he goes out with a coat. Meaning to say that the same thing. That if he comes, what is his coat? For a single man's coat is him. It's me. In other words, my identity of who I am does not go beyond my coat. I'm thinking about me. So after my coat, it's you. There's me and there's you, and I'm first. Right? That's how a lot of single men, they see themselves. They think about me. They buy 1 ice cream. A married man buys 2, right? Or a family man buys 5, maybe. You don't buy 1, right? A single man especially, they see themselves. Their life is themselves. They get married, suddenly now there's another person that is themselves. Now they're 2. Like, they used to say, okay, I want to go on vacation. So it's not so bad. I can go for $500, but not anymore. Now I'm married. Now it's $1,000. Right? It's a different story. I don't even imagine going on vacation without my other part of me. Right? So that's extended. So according to some commentaries, what it's saying is if he comes in single, he leaves single. And which makes sense, because what does it say next? Ve'im bal ishahu, if he comes in married, v'yatze ishto imo, then his wife comes out with him. In other words, if the guy becomes a slave to you, and he's a married man, so you have to take care of his wife too. And not only that, he brings in the wife, she goes with him when he leaves. Right? Now we know, it's going to tell us shortly, that if a man comes in single, and the owner is allowed to give him a wife, that is a woman to live with, and they have children, when he leaves, the wife and children stay. They are not really his wife and children in the real sense. If he really wants to get married, then he'll wait till he's going to go free. But at this point, he's basically owned by his master. Even though he's treated with respect, they're not the same abilities. But if he comes in single, he leaves single. If he comes in married, right, then he leaves married. But if he comes in single and he gets married, then he goes out single. That's what it's telling you. Now, if you look on the top of 418, it tells you what happens if this guy wants to stay. He has to stay for 6 years and leave in the 7th year. That's the rule. And he's now debt-free. Right? Imagine what it would be like to have no debts. You have no debts at all. Right? That's what he has. Now he walks out, he's debt-free. Now he can start a new life. But he says, I don't want a new life. I'm very happy being a slave. I don't have to make decisions. I don't have to choose what to eat. It's given to me. I don't have to choose what to do. It's done for me. I don't have to find a place to live. It's given to me. I don't have to make any decisions. I can have an easy life. That's what I want. So he says, if he says, Yomer Eved, the slave says, Ahavti Asadoni, I love my master, V'yes Ishti, and my wife is Monai, V'lo Yetze Choshin, I don't want to go out without him. Right? In other words, he gave me a wife, he gave me children, or he didn't. But I love this. I want to stay this way. I don't want to become a free man. Right? So it says, V'yigishu Adonov El HaElohim, V'yigishu El Adelis El HaMezuzah. So how does he say it here? He says, the master shall bring him to court, and he'll bring him to the door or the doorpost, and the master shall drill a hole into his ear with an awl. And then the slave pierces his ear. That's what he does. He pierces his ear. And it says that then the slave belongs to the master forever. And the master takes care of him forever. But this is the choice of the servant, if the master wants to. Right? The master has to agree. But the servant can make that choice. Right? No one can make him stay unless he gets in debt again and he can come back. But if he stays, right, now he's free, he can start his life over again. It's a big privilege the Torah gives him. But he chooses not to. So there's all these types of questions. Like the guy, first thing is, the master has to take him to court, and the master has to take the awl and pierce the guy's ear. Right? So you'd say, what did the master do wrong that he has to do that? I mean, who wants to do that? Not okay if that's your business, you pierce ears, but here you have an adult man. He's working for you. He likes it at your house. He doesn't want to leave. So you have to go and take him to court and say it, and then you got to take a hammer and a nail and you got to pound a hole in his ear. I don't want to do that. I don't want to hurt anybody. Well, I'm a nice guy. He wants to stay with me, so I have to hurt him. And you know, like Golda Meir said one time that you know, in the day of judgment, the Arabs will be judged not so much because they killed our children, but because they forced us to kill their children. And that's at that point. Here I'm the master. I'm a nice guy. I got to go and injure him. Why is that? So the commentaries tell us first, he is a nice guy, but the master has an obligation. The master has an obligation to educate this slave who's something's wrong with this guy. He steals. He doesn't have the money to pay back, right? And he seems to be enjoying having no responsibilities. Right? You know, it's a nice life. I don't have to do anything. It's like, you know, a single guy, an 18-year-old kid. Life is easy. He gets up at 2 in the afternoon. Right, sleeps 15 hours a day, stays up till 3 in the morning every day. He can watch TV, he can go out, he can do whatever he wants, go to a movie whenever he wants. Right? What do you think that the last, like me, right? I don't have time to go anywhere. I do go somewhere, but in general, I'm here in the morning, I'm here during the day, I'm here meeting people at night, and it's 7 days a week, right? That's how it is. Now, I'm not complaining. I happen to like very much what I do. Other people also like what they do, right? But we have responsibilities. I have responsibilities to my family, to my community, to my members. I have responsibilities, right, to my children, to my wife. Right? So I can't go and do whatever I want to do. Right? But an 18-year-old kid can. This guy is an adult man. He wants to live like that. So, right? It's my job as the master to teach him, to show him through my life, how I act, that this is how you're supposed to act. And your life is so much more meaningful when you're giving and you're doing. Right? For some reason, I didn't do it. I made his life too easy. I didn't do my job. So therefore, I have some responsibility over the fact that he wants to stay this way. And therefore, I'm the one who has to put the hole in his ear. Now, that's why I have to do it. But what does the Torah tell us? If the guy wants to stay, you put a hole in his ear. Why don't you put a hole in his nose? Right? Why don't you tie a ribbon around his wrist? What does it mean to put a hole in his ear? What is the Torah saying? Something about his ear, right, is significant to the fact that he wants to be a slave. So the Talmud says, and Rashi quotes it, that the ear that heard on Mount Sinai in last week's PARSHA, that I am the Lord your God, and you shall have no other gods before me. That is, I'm your master. God says, I'm your master. You don't have no other master but me. What are you making another master for? You want a man to be your master? I'm your master. You don't need two masters. Right? The ear who heard on Sinai, I am your master. Right? It says, is not listening. So the ear is punished because it didn't listen to what the Torah said, and the guy decided he wanted to be a slave. He wants a master. That's not enough to have God as his boss. He wants also a human as his boss. So again, let's think about that. It's not his ear that did something wrong, right? It's his brain that did something wrong. His brain didn't comprehend that. He didn't hear. He heard it. He's standing on Mount Sinai. I am the Lord your God. You should have no other gods before me. I am your master. I took you out of Egypt. You don't need any other master. He heard it. He was there. Right? It's only last week he was there. So if he was there and he heard it and that went on, so then what the problem is not that his ear, it's his brain, right? It goes in his ear. You can't shut things out of your ear. It goes in. So the problem is with his brain. So they should go and find a way to like put a hole in his brain or do something different. But so the answer is, according to the famous Ger Rabbi, that it is his ear. Because what happened is that he heard it, but he didn't listen. It entered his ear, but his ear didn't let it go into him to become a part of him. You have a person who smokes. The doctor tells him, listen, if you don't stop smoking, you're going to die at 40. You're not going to live. It's going to kill you. It's not a question. It's going to happen. Your life will be worse because of it. You have to stop smoking. And people still smoke, right? It says, you have to lose weight. You don't lose weight, you're going to have a heart attack. You're going to have high cholesterol. Your life is going to be worse. You're not going to be happy. Right? Lose weight. We don't lose weight. Right? We have this in our lives. All of us, every one of us has things in our lives like that, where we departmentalize ourselves. We hear something, right, and we don't really listen to it. We keep it away. Right? And that's what happened here. They heard, I'm the Lord your God, I'm your master, not some other guy. He heard it. Right? But his ear didn't let it enter into his brain. It didn't go further. He departmentalized it. And this is a problem with every human being. Every person has this problem to some extent. That we know what we're supposed to do, be it by following the Torah, by being a good spouse, by being a good parent, by being a good child. We know what we're supposed to do, but we don't do it. And it makes no sense. But that's how we are. We all do it. I'm not pointing a finger at anybody, but we all are like that. Sometimes we're like that a lot, like this guy, or sometimes it's a little bit. But the fact is, that Kutzker Rebbe says that it was the ear that heard on Sinai. That ear didn't allow the sound to enter into him, to become a part of him. So therefore, it is the ear's problem. It was the ear that did it. And we, who have the same problem, have to take this to heart. We have to understand that when we hear something that is a reality that really affects us, we need to act on it. We saw it in last week's parsha. I didn't touch on it much, but it says Vayavo Yisro came, right? Is Vayishma Yisro. Yisro heard and he came, right? It says he heard something and he came to be with Moshe and the Jewish people. So they say, I spoke about this part. What did he hear? It says he heard the war with Amalek. He heard the splitting of the Red Sea. He heard about the giving of the Torah. So any of these things were big enough to say, you know what? Judaism is true. I'm going to be with Moshe. But the fact is, the whole world heard. According to our understanding, everyone in the world heard about the Red Sea splitting. Everyone in the world heard about God coming and giving the Torah to the Jews. Everyone heard this in the world. So why didn't they come? Why didn't the whole world come and convert at that time? They say the Jews are the most powerful nation in the world. They go to war against the Egyptians, and the Egyptians drowned. Well, that's a great war. You don't even have to lift up your hand. Right? God just killed them all. Right? You go to war against Amalek, nothing. Amalek is like a nation of warriors. Doesn't matter. They're destroyed. You have all of these things happen. Right? God and man touch. Right? The giving of the Torah. But the whole world should have shown up and said, we want to be a part of this. And they didn't. Only Yisro did. Because the whole world heard it, but they didn't let it enter into their mind, into their psyche. It didn't change them. So it was very nice, and they turned the page in the newspaper and want to see what's going on. But Yisro, that's what was special about him. He heard it, and he did something about it. And that's here. This guy hears, I am the Lord your God, and he doesn't do anything about it. And we also do that to some extent, and we need to learn that lesson, not to live our lives in a way where when we hear something that's important, that's significant, that makes a difference, that we don't just ignore it because it's not nice, it's not what we want to hear. Like anybody who smokes, I can understand it. It's hard to stop. It's painful to stop. That you don't want to stop so fast, so you don't want to know that it'll kill you. You just don't want to. And you certainly don't want to hear it from people. Right? So you turn it off. You don't listen. I know that when, and I see this with myself, that when occasions when I'm really overweight, I will not look in a mirror. Like I'll notice after a while that I can walk through a house and know there's mirrors, and I always look the other way without even thinking about it because I don't want to look. Right? And you know what happens? When I look, I don't see it. I always see it. Really, I get a photograph and I'll say, my God, look how I look in this photograph. Terrible. I'm 30 pounds overweight. I'm 50 pounds overweight, whatever it is. Even in the mirror, when I look, I fool myself. And then I fool myself not to look there either. Right? Because I know the facts. It will kill me. I will die younger because of it. My career will not be as good because of it. I will not be happy because of it. I will be taking medication because of it. Still do it. Right? That's where we have to learn. So that's an important thing about why he has this happen to him. Right? Now we go on a little bit more of a discussion about slaves, different types of slaves, and so forth. when we get to the next page on 420 and 421, right by the top it starts, one who strikes a man so that he dies shall be put to death. But for one who had not lain in ambush and God caused it to come to his hand, I shall provide you a place to which he shall free. Premeditated murder, that's murder. You are responsible to be. You killed someone, you're responsible to die. You killed someone by mistake, you killed somebody inadvertently, it's a different story. There are ways that you deal with it, just like in court here. Right, you have all of these various, very important laws, and they're telling you that all of these laws of how to deal with people are from the Torah. They're from God, right? And it talks about hitting someone. If you strike a man shall strike the eye of his slave or the eye of his maidservant and destroy it, he shall set him free. If he knocks out a tooth, man, he shall set him free. In other words, the guy owes you money, right? That's why he's working for you. But if you abuse him, you forfeit your money. He goes free now with no debt. Right? Then it talks about at the bottom of 422 and 23, it talks about if an ox will kill a person, a man or a woman, and the person will die. So then the ox is stoned, right? Not because it's punished, an ox doesn't understand, it's because it's bloodthirsty. An animal that kills gets used to it. It changes the animal. So if they kill the animal, and then, but if the animal is repeatedly hurting people, then the owner is responsible also. At first he's not. And it goes on to talk about it, a few different examples. But we're going to, let's look at, move ahead a bit, where it talks about another area in 426 and 427. It begins with chapter 22. If a thief is discovered while tunneling in, and he is struck and dies, there is no blood guilt on this account. What it's talking about? Imagine somebody is tunnels into your house. And, you have a house, and you have your security system, and the guy digs a hole in your backyard and comes up into your basement, into your house, right? And it's the middle of the night. Now, in the middle of the night, he expects you to be home. Right? You're home at night. So if he comes up like that, he comes into your house, and it's in the nighttime when you're expected to be home, and you see him and you kill him. So maybe you have to go to jail. You killed somebody. You're not allowed to kill. We just went through the section. We skipped it, but there's a whole section. What happens if you kill someone? Who's to say that? Where do we know that self-defense is a good defense? How do we know that? How do we know that in the Torah or in the world that if somebody's going to kill you, you should kill them? Where do we know that from? So this is where we get it. So here it says if a person comes into your house at night and he's going to steal from you, he's not going to kill you, he's going to steal from you. But because he's coming at night, when chances are you're home, he's prepared to kill you because he expects that you may be there and you may fight. So he's prepared to kill you. And what you do is you kill him. You're not responsible. Right? That's the law. You're not responsible if he does that according to the Torah. If a person comes in during the day, and it's usually understood that you're not home during the day, right? And you happen to be home, and you kill him, you have a certain amount of responsibility. Because in that case, chances are, if he sees you, he'll run away, because he doesn't want to get caught. And he comes when you're not home. But if he would come when he expects you to be home, then he's willing to kill you. But if he comes when he expects you're not home, he's purposely waiting for that. Right? He checks out, like I know one time, it was sad, but somebody tried to break into our house. We had gone away for a week, right? And we keep our cars in the garage, right? All year. We use the garage for the cars. And so we were away. So somebody must have seen that we were away. We have an alarm and everything, but they must have seen it. It was a number of years ago. We came back, had our cars in the garage, so whoever was looking didn't see that we had come back. As far as they knew, we were still gone. So they came to the back of the house and tried to pry open a window, and the alarm went off. And of course, we were home. Right? We were home then. So that person, as soon as the alarm went off and they could hear noise, besides the alarm, they heard us, they ran away. Well, why didn't they just shoot me? Because they're not interested in that. They just want to steal and run. Another guy says, if I have to kill someone to get what I need, I'll do it. So the one who's prepared to kill you, you can kill him. You have self-defense, the Torah says, is a good response. You can defend yourself. Right? But if somebody comes and clearly they aren't interested in hurting you, they're running away from you, you can't just shoot him as he's running away. That you can't do. That's the penalty for theft is not death. You can't kill somebody for that. But if somebody is attacking you, then you can. So that's what it's telling you here.
Rabbi,
yeah.
When you heard the alarm, was that the night or the day?
It was at night.
At night. But he thought there was...
Nobody was home. We hadn't been home for a week. So at night, it was different than usual. Normally, if somebody breaks in at night, they presume you're home. This guy's breaking in at night because he knew we were away, and then darkness helps him get away. But as soon as he heard noise of people in the house, he ran away. Right?
Okay.
The next section deals with responsibility for animals. If you have an animal that hurts somebody or an animal that eats somebody's food, you can imagine you have an animal that, let's say you have a goat, and the goat goes to your neighbor's yard and he eats I don't know, the wheat that's growing in his yard, or he eats the apples from his apple tree. So you're responsible for that. So it talks about those types of things. It talks here on the item 429 what happens with what if a man seduces a woman he's not married to, or rapes a woman, what's the laws on that? And it goes through, right, that if he if it happens that he seduces her, right, in other words he tricks her, right, then he's responsible and he has to pay for that. If a person rapes a woman, he also, of course, he's responsible. It's a violent act. Right? He's responsible. You next have an interesting line, which is this: "You shall not permit a sorceress to live," right? Which is "machshefa lo tichya." Do not suffer a witch to live, is the expression people use. That is a very interesting point, because is the Torah telling us that witches are real? That there is such a thing as witches and they kill people? And remember, God wrote this. So if God wrote this, God knows the facts, right? Can witches make incantations and do things? Or are they not real? So here it says, you should not allow a witch to live. That is to say, a person who either claims that they have the power of evil, or does have the power of evil and uses it, has put their own life at risk. In other words, the Torah says such a person, you shouldn't let them live. So there's an interesting argument between two authorities, the Rambam and the Ramban, as to, is there such a thing as magic? It says here a witch. So does the Torah mean a real witch? She come out with her thing and does a Harry Potter on us? So it says the Ramban says, yeah, there is. There's black magic. That there's a concept in Judaism dealing with balance. That there has to be a balance in the world. That if there's good in the world, there has to be evil in the world. For instance, I'll give you in a very simple way. If let's see, if I tell you have to keep kosher, right, and everything is kosher, so then it's easy to keep kosher, right? If I tell you have to keep kosher and there's no kosher food anywhere for hundreds of miles, it's impossible to keep kosher, right? So what does God do? He makes a balance. He says you have to keep kosher. He gives you a desire to eat, right? We get hungry, right? He gives you equal opportunity to eat kosher and unkosher. Right? Maybe the unkosher is a little less expensive, maybe the kosher tastes a little better, who knows, but it's basically a balance. You can choose either way. As long as you have that balance, you can choose. You have free will. If you have no kosher food, you can't choose. You're not going to be able to eat kosher food. If you have no unkosher food and everything's kosher, so of course you're also not choosing. You're just doing the will of God, but not because you choose to, because there's no other choice. So God makes a balance so that you have a free choice. You can choose to do the right thing or choose to do the wrong thing. Therefore, He rewards you when you do the right thing, because you could have done the wrong. Right? Here the idea is that if we believe that there is goodness in the world, that people bring holiness into the world through keeping the Torah, prophets, for instance, in the days of prophecy, great, ethical teachers, there has to be a balance of negativity in the world as well. It has to be that if I look at an observant Jew, I can also look at something else and see a choice. It can't be that I have no choice but to be an observant Jew. That I'm going to look and say, wow, these observant Jews, they are all rich and they're all happy and nobody ever gets sick and nobody has a divorce and life is terrific. And I'm going to be one of those. Right? Of course, you have no free will, really. You have no choice. If there's problems everywhere, so then you don't see that it's like that. So that's the balance. So as long as there's goodness in the world, there has to be evil in the world. So the Ramban says if there are people who are prophets, You have prophets in the world. You have people who do miracles, Jewish leaders who caused miracles, like caused the hand of God to do miracles. Then you have to have the power of evil to do the same. Otherwise, there's no balance anymore. It must exist. So as long as there was a power to do good with some type of magic, there was a power to do evil with it. So he said, is there such a thing as a witch? Yes. Can a witch actually do magic? Yes. And therefore the Torah says, but such a thing is evil. If you see someone do it, you should stop them. They ask the question, why does it say a witch? It's a woman. Why does it say a woman, not a man? There are men also. It says because historically, most people who did this were women. I don't know why, but that was the case. So the Torah uses feminine, but it means both men and women. Now, if you had a man who also practiced these black arts or evil magic, their life is subject to death. Now, that creates the balance between the two sides. The Rambam says there's no such thing as evil. There's evil power in the world. It's God. Everything comes from God. God's not going to have power, evil power. So then, what does it mean? Don't suffer a witch to live. He says, don't let an idiot who thinks that they're going around doing black magic live. They're stupid. They're being foolish, and people will listen to them, and they'll go astray, and they'll follow them. But they're not real. They may believe they're real, but they're not real. Right? There's nothing to it. So people will start following these crazy religions and following these crazy leaders, right, who do this black magic. So they should not because it's real, but because it's wrong. So therefore, you should kill them. That's how the Rambam looks at it. He says there's no such thing as black magic, and the Ramban with an N says that there is. Now today, what do we say today? So that, we can look at it many ways, but one thing is for sure: when you read about these practitioners of these arts, and you read it, like you open the newspaper, like in the Toronto Sun they have stuff, and in the free newspapers where they say, come see me and I'll read tea leaves, or I'll tell you your horoscope, or I'll use bones of deceased people and I'll tell you the future, right? They have all these different people from around the world, especially in Canada. There's a lot of immigrants who claim that they have these abilities, right? They're all fake. Every one of them is a fake, because today we believe that just as we don't, if you want to believe like the Ramban that there is black magic, well, we don't have prophecy today. We don't have people who force the hand of God to do miracles. So you're not going to have people on the other side doing it either. So that's for sure. Secondly is, if you follow the Rambam's opinion, there never was black magic, and these people are fakes. But we also understand, not even using Torah sources, just understanding how things are in the world, that in general, even if there was such power at one time, people today have lost the tradition of how to do it. They don't know what they're doing. Take a look at the horoscopes. When you read the horoscopes in the newspaper, you read it, right? You can pick any horoscope you want. Any one. You don't have to pick your own. Just pick any one you want. And it says nothing. You'll meet a man today. That's very nice. Unless you're locked in a closet, you'll probably meet a man. You will, good fortune will shine on you today. Yeah, you'll find a nickel, or you'll walk to the bus stop and the bus will come right away, right? Or you won't get any red lights, right? It's so broad and so non-specific, right? Because they've lost the tradition. Is there any type of power in the stars? There is, but we don't know how to do it anymore. We don't know how to read it. All of those things are lost, and therefore today we don't have such things. But that's what it's talking about here. Now we have and the next section is an important section, which beginning on 430 and 431 in verse 20, it says, "You shall not taunt or oppress a stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You shall not cause pain to any widow or orphan. If you dare to cause him pain, or if he shall cry out to me, I shall hear his cry. My wrath shall blaze, and I shall kill you by the sword, and your wives will be widows, and your children orphans." So here, this is where the Torah tells us that we have responsibility not only to treat everyone with dignity, but specifically widows and orphans and strangers. And here, literally, a stranger usually means a convert or a non-Jew who lives among you. You have to treat all of them with respect, and an extraordinary amount of respect, even more than normal. If you have an orphan child, right, you have to treat them even better than you would treat a regular child. If you have a widow, and why is that? So the Torah says that if you inflict pain on a widow, this is what goes through her mind. She says, he has power over me. And here's this adult man. He's stronger than I am. He's got more money than I am. He has power over me. If my husband was alive, he wouldn't do that. And so now, not only does she feel bad that he's hurting her, but now she's missing her husband. So she has double pain. And it's even worse because he's doing that. So that's why it says here that God says, if you'll do this, I am going to take care of her. She doesn't have a husband. I'm doing it. God says, I'm going to punish you if you treat a widow that way. And an orphan has no parents. An orphan would say, look what they're doing to me. The Jewish community is such a great Jewish community, and they're selling me out. They're doing this or they're doing that. I'm not going to stand for that. Right? They wouldn't do that if my parents were alive. And they tell us lots of stories about in Russia. They used to have forced, you had to go to the army. You were forced to go to the army. But it wasn't like in the U.S. where you had the draft and everybody would go, and then the ones who were more fit or whatever, they would go, and it was fair. Here, the Tsar would send people to a city, and he'd say, "I need 5 men from the city for the army." And when you went to the army, then you never came back. You were in the army for your whole life if you were alive. So they'd come in and they'd say, "I want 5 boys." So anybody with money would try to bribe so that their boy wouldn't go. And if they knew a little orphan kid, that's the one that they would send. They'd say, "Don't take my kid. There's that kid down the street," because nobody would defend him. So they'd take the orphans. So we can understand why, because they have no parents to take care of them, no one to take care of them. So they're going to take someone, take the orphan. So the orphan says, "Yeah, see what they do to me? I have no father to stick up for me." So now he not only has the pain of being an orphan, but he has the pain again of remembering that he doesn't have a parent. And that's why the Torah says it's so important that we treat these people with added respect. They're sensitive. Maybe they're overly sensitive. You have it. If I make a flyer and I say we're going to have an event and it's $18 a person but $30 a couple. So how does a widow feel? I'm charging her extra because her husband died. I don't mean that. That's not what but I'm not thinking when I do such a thing. I'm not thinking. When I do it. I hear like from singles, it's the same thing. Right? The Torah doesn't say that, but it's the same idea. I did that one time. We had an event, and it was the newlywed game. So it was 4 couples, right? We didn't want to tell single people they can't come. They're welcome to come, but we wanted to encourage couples. So we gave us a discount for couples because it wasn't cheap, and you had to pay for 2 people. So a woman who was single called me up and she said, "Don't you know what you're saying to me when you write that? You don't really want me. You're charging me extra to come because I'm not fortunate enough to have a husband, a boyfriend or something, because I'm all alone. And for whatever reason, you're singling me out." And she was right. She was right. We didn't mean to, but that's what it was doing. It's the same idea. We need to be sensitive in these areas beyond normal sensitivity, because even if a widow or an orphan is overly sensitive, they have the right to be overly sensitive. That's what the Torah is telling us here, that how a person should ask. Then the last line in this section, let's see how we're doing here. Okay, it says, "When you lend money to my people, to the poor person who is with you, do not act toward him as a creditor. Do not lay interest upon him." So first thing is, when you lend money to my people, right? Who's God calling his people? Poor people. He's saying my people are the Jewish people, but he's not saying that. He says, it says talave es ami es ha'ani. If you are lending money to my people, the poor. If you give money to the poor, right, you're going to let why would a guy borrow money? Because he's poor. He needs to borrow money. He wants to buy food. He wants to invest in something. Whatever it is, he needs to borrow money. Now, if you borrow money for the poor, don't charge interest. And don't act difficult to them. Right? Don't act like a creditor. Right? Treat that person with respect. It doesn't mean you should give up your money. Right? That's not saying that. You should get your money. You lend money. But what God is saying, if you lend money to the poor, right, God is saying, this is my family. You're lending money to my family. That's what you're doing. So remember, I'm involved here. So don't act like a creditor. What does that mean? It says, for instance, let's say the guy's supposed to pay you in 30 days. It's 25 days. And you could use the money. And you happen to be in his neighborhood. So you go knock on the door and you say, "Listen, I know it's not 30 days, but maybe you got the money?" right? That's acting like a creditor. That's making the guy's feeling bad. He doesn't have the money. On the 30th day you told him, don't go to him on the 25th day. Right? It says that the rabbis in the Talmud, when they would lend money to somebody like that, they would, let's say that normally they would walk by that person's house on their way home, they would go the long way, so they wouldn't walk by his house. So he shouldn't see them and feel that they want the money now. Yeah.
Right, what if you give money to the poor? Right? Does it say how the same thing, that you shouldn't treat them any different? Like,
well, you mean giving rather than loaning?
Yeah. What if you gave them money? Should you, does it talk about that? Like,
yeah, but not here. There's whole sections about giving charity and the importance of supporting the poor.
Does it say so you can't expect them? You should treat them with respect and not say, "Oh no, you owe me." Like.
Yeah, certainly,
right?
certainly. The whole idea of tzedakah, when we get to that section, is very different than charity. Charity comes from a Greek word, and that is that a person feels for someone else. If you don't feel for them, you don't give them, right? And then if I feel differently, then I treat you differently. But tzedakah means I'm making things right. Tzedek means to make things correct. I'm making things right. It's not right that you have no money. So I have money to give you, I'm making it right. And there is a different attitude, but we'll talk about it when we get there.
So charity and tzedakah is different?
Yeah, because the act is the same, but the meaning behind the word charity in English, it has a different basic meaning than our word. It's just like when I say slave, and when a non-Jew says slave, they're thinking about a slave that you beat up and he eats on the floor and he's treated like a dog. And I'm saying you have to treat him with respect. When I talk about giving money to the poor, I'm talking about tzedek, doing the right thing. They're talking about having a bleeding heart and caring and doing it because you feel bad for them. If you don't feel bad, you don't have to do it. I do, because I'm doing the right thing. It makes no difference how I feel. So here, you lend money to the poor. God is saying, I'm the family of the poor. Right? Make sure you treat that person correctly, and go out of your way not to treat him in a way where he has to feel that he's always thinking about, you owe him, you owe him, you owe him. So it says, if you take your fellow's garment as security, until sunset shall you return it to him. So let's say I come to you and I say, I want to borrow some money. You say, what do you got for collateral? You're allowed to do that. It's your money. So I say, well, I got a suit. And we have the same size. Let's say I have a suit, and a new suit, right? And it's my only one. So, well, a suit's not a great example. Let's say I have pajamas. So it says, I give you the pajamas as to hold on to as my collateral, and I have your money to use. So now it's nighttime. I have no pajamas now. You're not going to use them, right? So yes, the Torah says you should give them back to me to use at night, and then I have to give them back to you in the morning. They're yours. If I don't pay you, they're yours. But don't inflict pain on the guy. The guy's going to be cold. Give it back to him. But he has to give it back to you. For it says, right, if you take your fellow's garment security, until sunset shall you return it to him. For it alone is his clothing, it is his garment for his skin. In what should he lie down? So it will be that if he cries out to me, I shall listen, for I am compassionate. If you take it and you don't give it back to him, and he cries out to God because he's cold, I'm going to listen to him. You don't want me to do that. So you make sure you give it to him. Right? It talks about giving false witness. Now, here's a very interesting one. On the top of 434 and 40 to 35, it says, if you see the donkey of someone you hate crouching under its burden, would you refrain from helping him? You shall help repeatedly with him. So, here's a case. This is the old days. Right? Well, this even today. You're in the street and you see your neighbor who you hate. His station wagon is filled with stuff, and it won't go up the hill because it's not strong enough. Maybe it's snowing or something and it's stuck. So you should go out and help him, even though you hate him. You should go out and help him. So that you would not help him, right? You would not help him just because you don't like him? No, you should help him. That's what it says. So from this, the Talmud has an interesting story. It says, what if you're walking down the road and you see two people? One's your friend, one's your enemy. They both have donkeys. The donkeys have lots of weight on their back, and the donkey's straining to walk, and it'll break his back. So you have to help. Someone has to help. So who do you help? Do you help your friend or you help your enemy? Like, which one do you help? Right? Both are acts of chesed, right? They're both acts of kindness. Both are stopping the animal from being in pain. So logically, the world would say, well, of course you're going to help your friend. I mean, it's your friend, it's your brother, let's say. You're going to help your brother, then you're going to help your enemy, or you're going to help your brother. So the Torah says, no, you help your enemy first. Why is that? This is because it teaches you to work on your character. Your character. You have a character. You hate people. You have someone you hate. Even if it's just justified, you should go and help that person so that you should be able to rid yourself from the feelings of hatred. That when you help somebody, you'll have affection for them. So you should always go and help them first. Now, saying that it doesn't mean that you don't help your other person. You do that too. Now, it says, if you notice the words change here, it says, if you see the donkey of someone you hate crouching on his burning, would you refrain from helping him? You shall help repeatedly with him. So it doesn't say you should help him. First it says you should help him. Then it says you should help with him. And that's to say a number of things. One is, if let's say the guy, you don't like the guy, he sees you coming and he says, the Torah says he's got to help me. So I'm going to sit under this tree and drink an iced tea, and he can do it. Right? So it says, no. If he's not prepared to do it, you don't have to do it. He has to be prepared to do it also. You're doing it with him. Right? So this is a very interesting point. It's one of a way that we look also at tzedakah a little differently. Because the world, it says, a person can say, I'm poor, the government owes me. I used to work, I don't work now, I don't have a job, I don't have any money, the government owes me, it has to pay me welfare, it has to do this, I'm throwing myself on the government the rest of my life, this is how I'm going to live. And it's done, and you can do it. Right? So the Torah says, that's not right. Why is it not right? Because you're supposed to try to help yourself. Also, yes, if the government's offering you money, you can take it. But you should try to help yourself. Right? Try to get out of this situation. Right? That's why it says that if you come across a situation and you're okay and he's not okay, you should help with him. He should do it with you. So the guy who's destitute should try to get work. He should try to help himself. Yes, the government can help him also, but he has to also help himself. If he's not prepared to help himself, then you don't have to help him. That's what it's telling you. If he can, of course. Yes?
Rabbi, what do you mean, like you say he's your enemy? Like if he does, you see him do bad things and treat people badly, and then that's your enemy, like, and then.
Well, it's a funny thing because the Torah says you're not allowed to hate other people, right? You can only hate an evil person, someone who's evil. So if the person's really evil, then you wouldn't have to help them because they're evil. So who's it talking about here? So it's talking about that you hate someone inappropriately. It's not right. You hate him because he's your next door neighbor and he always plays loud music.
Oh.
You hate him because he's your next door neighbor and his dog goes on your lawn all the time. Right? Or his kids tear up your vegetables. And so you hate him. You're not supposed to hate him. So how do you stop hating him? Go help him. Go help his donkey. That's how you'll stop hating him. That's what you'll do. Right? I was reading in a story about, and it had the names of all the people, I just don't remember them. But there's a rabbi in the States who was an illustrious rabbi. It was like the 1940s. And he came across a rabbi from the Bronx, another rabbi, nobody knew him. He was a simple rabbi. He was a rabbi, but little congregation, nothing special. And he goes to this famous rabbi and he says, please, would you come to my daughter's wedding? It would mean a lot to me. It would show my congregation that this great rabbi came to my daughter's wedding. Also, it would honor us, and my daughter would be happy. Would you come? So usually, it's the story said that when you'd invite someone like that, they didn't have a car, so you would pay. The invitee would send a way for him to get there. You'd send a taxi, or pay for a taxi, or arrange for it. He doesn't do it. Nevertheless, the rabbi said he'd come, even though he was busy, even though he doesn't know this man. He said he would come. He felt bad for the guy. So he get there. So here's this blessed rabbi. They're going to give him a blessing under the chuppah. They're going to honor him. So nothing. They don't do anything. He just sits there with his wife. So it says his wife got upset. We go through all of this. We have to pay money. We have to give up our time. It's not that we haven't that much time as it is. We're so busy with things, right? And then the guy just totally ignores us. Right? So he calms his wife down. Story ends. Years go on. He has a wedding for his daughter, this famous rabbi, and he invites this other rabbi who he has nothing to do with him. And now this famous rabbi has all the famous rabbis come because he's famous. They all know each other. He's a top guy. So everybody in the city is wondering who's he going to give the honors to. He's got all these great rabbis. So he gives all these different great rabbis, and then this guy, this schlepper rabbi from the Bronx, he gives him an honor. And so like anybody who knew the story says, what is this guy? He's got to be crazy. He doesn't know him. He goes out of his way to go to his wedding. The guy ignores him, doesn't pay for his way, doesn't do anything for him. So, and then he goes and invites him like 10 years later to his daughter's wedding, and gives him an honor when you have all these more honorable people, and he doesn't even know the guy. So people ask him, why did you do it? Why did you do it? And he says, I have my reasons. So finally he explained to somebody, he said that where he went to yeshiva, they had a philosophy, which is not everybody has this philosophy, but the philosophy was, if someone does something wrong to you, do something good for them. He says, because if you do something wrong to them, it'll just escalate. You do something good for them, that the worst is they'll feel bad for doing bad to you, and they'll stop doing it, and they'll be nice to you, because they see that you're treating them nicely. So he said, that's what I did. I invited him, and I gave him an honor. Right? It's the same concept, right, of what we're talking about here. That if a person's donkey, right, is your enemy, and the donkey's in pain, you should help that one first before you help your friend, because you need to work on yourself. You shouldn't hate that person, right? That's the point. We're pretty much finished, so let's see what else we can. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, well, you know what we have here at the end? We have, first thing, a very difficult section, but we get to the end, if you look at 440 and 441, you have the story of the giving of the Torah again. Moses says, go up to Hashem, the Kohanim should come with you. Moses goes up on the mountain, and the people say, all of the words that Hashem has spoken we will do. That's a famous Naseh v'Nishma. We will do what God says, and we will learn what God says. Right? Not the other way around, by the way. We're committed to doing whatever God says. Now we're going to try to understand it. So this is the giving of the Torah. Now we had the giving of the Torah last week. Why is it telling you it again? So the commentaries tell us that, first thing, the Torah is not a history book. Things can be out of order in the Torah, and it's out of order purposely here. And it's doing it to tell you, the giving of the Torah first, then you have all of these, seems like mundane laws that have really, like court laws, and then you have the giving of the Torah again. Why is that? Because they want you to know that these mundane laws are as much a part of the Torah as the other things, as Shabbos and as all of the other things. And here it gets, it gets pretty wild. If you look, for instance, at the last line on 441, it says, Moses, Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu, and the 70 of the elders ascended. They went up Mount Sinai to get the Torah. They saw the God of Israel, and under his feet was the likeness of sapphire brickwork, and it was like the essence of the heaven and purity. What's going on here? Moshe and the 70 elders went up a mountain. They saw God, and he's sitting on a chair with his foot on a sapphire. What is this? So I can't even claim that I can tell you what this means. It's certainly very deep, but what it's showing you, like, this is spirituality, right? This is something. This is not like don't steal, right? Don't be mean to people. This is like, way up there in spiritual things. Just like the first PARSHA of the mountain smoked and there was noise and God came down and everybody heard, I am the Lord your God. It's showing you these two parts are one part. The section in the middle of these laws are as much a part of the spiritual giving of the Torah as this is. As spiritual it is to say that you see God, whatever that means. It's just as spiritual to say you help your friends and you help your enemy. You take care of the widows. You take care of the orphans. That's seeing God. That's what that means. You want to be close to God? Help the widow. That's how you're close to God. You want to be close to God? Do the right thing for people. Be there for people. Then you'll be close to God. It's not just these abstract prophetic visions of God sitting on his throne. It's also how we act day to day.